So let's jump right in. The conversation broadly is about sort of classic design and what that means today, but we're gonna dive into a lot of different things. But Mark, you and I were just talking earlier about one of the things that you've done such a tremendous job of doing is sort of creating this brand, Mark D Sikes, and sort of and sort of wrapping
D for delicious.
some of and what is the D for? Good point, Annie. Let's talk about that.
It's for Donald, my middle name.
Donald. Okay. So Mark Donald Sikes has created this incredible brand that has embraced and almost taken ownership of blue and white and stripes. And so tell us how you did that. How did you so successfully build that brand that you are so associated with those things?
Well, it was probably a happy accident, but it first all started like a long time ago. 10 years ago, I started a blog, and the blog was truly more of a creative outlet for myself to like share all the things that I truly loved. I mean, it was really just, I had worked many years in retail. I moved to Los Angeles. It was just a creative outlet. I saw all these people doing blogs. I was like, I can do this. And so I started just talking about truly what I loved, like, you know, blue and white and wicker and iconic people like Jackie Onassis or Maria Agnelli. I talked about beautiful homes, like Bunny's home in Punta Cana, and just really like put together like, it's almost like a diary of all the things that I loved. I got to interview some really wonderful people through the process. And I think the blog, because it was so authentic and genuine and truly focused on the things I'm still focusing on, it kind of created like this platform for me to move on and do some interior design work and then start working on collaborations. So that's kind of how it started. And I think it's, you know, in hindsight, I think it's mostly just that I've been super consistent, not consciously. I've just talked about what I love.
Right, and that's what you're passionate about. So tell me things like Jackie O and right, and some of those sort of iconic figures. Tell me why they resonated for you so much, and why that was part of your sort of
I don't
makeup.
know. At a very, very young age, you know, I remember driving around in the car with my grandparents, and I was always mesmerized by big white houses. I always thought a green grass lawn was beautiful. I remember like distinctively, you know, reading my mother's magazines and kind of understanding that Grace Kelly was really beautiful, but Jackie Kennedy was really chic. Like I kind of like understood all that kind of stuff. So even the things as a little child, I, you know, still love today. So I don't know, those big white houses and all those things that I like to talk about are just things I like.
Yeah. And in a similar way, Annie, you were exposed to sort of great design, right? From a very
an early age. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit of that story, because it actually is part of the reason that you're working with Bunny.
Why I know Bunny. Well, first of all, my mother was an avid antiques collector, so in the day when quilts were such a thing, going to auctions with her when I was little, like I got dragged around everywhere, learning what an Ushak rug is, or learning about Chippendale furniture, all those things that you sort of just file away. And then the world of interiors came into my life, and I have pretty much every edition of it, like going through. Can you not hear me? Now can you hear me?
We're going to make Annie even louder now.
Your earring is.
Oh, my earring is the problem?
Oh, they're hitting your. I was wondering what the rat-a-tat-tat was.
There you
go. Yeah.
So I was very fortunate. You know, my mother had a great eye, and I was dragged to every antique shop, auction, all of it. And through osmosis, you know, came to love these things. I also am very fortunate. You know, I grew up in New England. I grew up surrounded by beautiful architecture, traditional architecture. Yeah. And I still, you know, you go to Martha's Vineyard near Edgartown, you're like, wow, these are still really nice houses. They hold up over time. So the world of interiors came into it. I mean, I knew every page, every magazine. It was long before, you know, digital was happening, and that's how I absorbed different people's designs and what made it fabulous. It can be quirky, it can be all these different things. It's not one specific thing. It's the alchemy of combining, you know, a certain piece of furniture and a certain rug and artwork, and there is no real formula, but you can see greatness, you know. And this one right here, greatness.
A legend. I know she doesn't like us using any words like
A very
that.
youthful
but-
legend.
Yeah, yeah. But so tell us quickly the story of sort of how you would come to. Bunny can tell the story.
You can tell.
About us.
Or about us.
Let's
Yeah.
start with the us story, and then we'll
I mean, I
talk
can
about
tell or you
the
can
bunny
tell.
story.
You tell.
My stepfather, Winty Emmett, my mother was his fourth wife. She always used to have to say, "Oh, remember me, fourth wife over here." I think it was his favorite wife, or she was his favorite wife. But the wife before my mother was Elsie,
Elsie Emmett.
who worked for Sister Parish. So my stepfather was great friends with Sister Parish, and they would go visit her every summer. And so you worked for Sister Parish, and you ultimately, when my stepfather moved to Stockbridge to live with my mother, Bunny rented his house.
Yes.
So
we go way back.
Yeah.
and we
it's a great-
shared the same PR person, Elizabeth Blitzer, and she said, "Oh, Bunny wants to do rugs." I'm like, "I am all in. Yay, let's do it." And it was probably the easiest contract negotiation ever.
Right.
Besides mine, just kidding.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was easier than yours. Way easier. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it was just a no-brainer
Yeah.
to do that, and that's how we
And you
started
guys have
doing
been
this.
working
Yes.
together ever since.
So now, is it 6 years, 5
Yes.
years, something like that?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, so and Bunny, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and in this conversation about sort of this classic style, it's always interesting to hear how you sort of start a project and how you look at things for the first time, and sort of what you call up, but also what you don't.
It's very interesting because I didn't grow up with Pinterest. I didn't grow up with a computer. And even today, though I love it and I go to it, it's not where I start things. And the reason I don't do that is that I feel that I owe it to my clients to be as inventive as I can, creative for that project. And so, you start with the architecture. You start with, where am I working? What kind of building? How do these people want to live? All of these things are the things that you kind of have to get your head around about before you even go to put a color scheme together. And also, sometimes I like to go out and go shopping, believe it or not, not online. And all of a sudden, you see the most beautiful rug, and you think, this is the beginning of this room. Or you see a piece of furniture, or sometimes my clients, have art, or, you want to know. I mean, my clients come with things, which is nice, because sometimes when you have to go buy everything, you always feel like in the end it needs the soul. So I love it when people have things, and I look at their things and think, okay, how am I going to put it together? Because you want to create a space that's unique to them, and it's not, it's not. I was saying, it's very interesting. I have two projects now in New York. One was for, and this is going to be a real challenge for me, an apartment I did about 20 years ago, very traditional, beautiful antique furniture, wonderful art, and they have just bought an apartment in one of the new buildings in New York with 18-foot ceilings and glass windows to the floor, as modern as it can be. And I'm very excited about it because I don't want them to get rid of what they have, but how do you take the beauty, the good furniture, put it in a modern way, put it in a totally different setting, because I think that you're going to have a much more interesting room and an interior because you have to think outside the box.
Well, and is that an opportunity that you don't get to have very often, because people are sort of coming to you for a notion of what your look is, and you're getting to do a much more modern project, right? Than you would
and
normally?
also you try to, I think we all try to influence our clients a little bit and say, why don't you, it's just like, listen, I want to look younger, I don't want to look older. So you want to freshen it up, and you want to, if you're a good designer, you give your clients the confidence to do something that maybe isn't in their bandwidth, and you show them how it can be done, and I think they get excited about it. So you want to be as inventive as you can with new materials, new rugs, to make them
Yeah.
feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, update them, right?
And I think today, it's what's sad to me is, of course, we talk about this all the time, is, young people say they don't want antique furniture. I bought 2 things at auction in Hudson, New York last week that are so beautiful, and I paid less than I would have to pay at Restoration Hardware for brand new furniture. And I thought to myself, what is wrong with people?
Bunny
And-
is taking advantage of the
What
fact that
is
the
wrong with
millennials are not
people?
out there shopping.
And-
She's loading up
and I-
warehouses
and
full of
I'm
antiques.
putting
putting it-
She's
you.
getting ready because they're all
But
going
I'm
to wake
putting
up
it-
and
this-
she's going to be ready.
This was for a young client, and we're putting this piece of furniture with a big modern painting over
Yeah.
it and lucite lamps, and it looks fantastic. And I'm like, this is what people should be doing. It's out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and Mark, you talk about this a lot too, that nothing is worse than people who aren't sort of inserting some of themselves and also some of history. It can be a contemporary space, but without some of the classic sort of pieces, it often just doesn't look whole or real or warm, right?
Right. Well, when we're concepting out rooms, we, do our schemes with our fabrics and our colors and our inspiration, but we always like to leave openings for pieces of furniture, like special things like antiques. It's interesting when I go out shopping for a specific antique for a project, I can't ever find it, but if I'm out shopping for someone else, I'll all of a sudden see something that works here. So it's this very organic thing, but we do try to create openings to be able to layer those things in. Obviously, the last stage of all the accessorizing is where you can layer a lot of things in. But it's a little bit of a complicated process because if you're looking for an antique settee, you need to already think about what fabric you want to put on it. So you have to already have the fabric ready to go and all that kind of stuff. But that's how we make sure that
And
we
hope
integrate.
that you find the settee.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and Mark,
That's
do you
why we're
have-
going to Scott's maybe later today. Maybe we'll find
which I think a lot of people are heading over to
Yes.
in a little while. But do you have the same challenge of people sort of coming to you for a specific look, and you want to sort of move them forward or move them in a different direction? And I mean, how do you deal with that?
No, not necessarily. I think
Okay.
people come to all of us as designers because they know what our work is, so they're wanting that look.
Yeah.
It's super important to me though that our work reflects the client. They obviously come to us for a reason, and whatever that might be. But I also want to make sure that their personality and their lifestyle and their personal things are integrated. So we make a conscious effort to do that.
Yeah.
And I always think that the end result is just wonderful.
I'm so glad I'm not a designer.
It's not
I
easy.
mean, it isn't easy,
a
right?
lot of work.
Because I get to design things that get incorporated into your interiors, but I don't have to manage the client, and there's real management involved, like real management.
Yeah. And so Bunny, is that one of the most challenging parts of it, is the client management?
I think that I've been very, very lucky. I have wonderful clients. I think that it's very important that that you win the confidence of the client, that you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about. I've always said, I've talked to you about it. I mean, my back office is as important as I am. Getting back to clients, being on top of it, letting them know you're running a business. You're not just trying to sell them things. You really have a business behind it. We get so involved with the architecture. I mean, we start on the projects working with the architects. Sometimes I do the architecture myself. So I think that once the client feels that, yes, this person has knowledge, like you go to the doctor, you listen to your doctor because they know more about things. So you have to be able to really be sure of what you're talking about. It's like Mark, I mean, I take my clients shopping and one day with them, and they realize that I am pointing out things, that I know furniture, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it gives them the confidence. So I think that you have to be strong enough to show your clients that you do have a skill set, and they are going to come back to you over and over again because they don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah. I want to stay with shopping as a discussion because it's a really important one today, right? And Bunny and I talk about this a lot. because so many people are shopping online, or they aren't going to design centers as much, and we struggle with it. What do you mean you're not going to actually sit on pieces of furniture that you're thinking of specifying for a client, or that sort of thing? And what's so fun about coming to a market like this is people can't wait to get to the showrooms. People can't, right? I mean, we were all together last night, and there was a group who had been shopping all day at market, and they were so energized about interacting with the physical product, about the upholstery that they were thinking of using, about the lighting that they were looking at. I mean, talk to me a little bit, Bunny, because I know that you're seldom happier than when you're sort of really out shopping.
Also, I think that, we as designers, whether you come here or you go to High Point, if you go in and you sit on the furniture and you know what you're buying, it's easy for you to sell it. It's harder if you haven't done that, because the client's going to say, is it comfortable? And you're going to say, well, I don't know. So part of what we do when we come here is to look at our sources, to get catalogs, to build up our own, places that we know we can buy from. And then we've seen it, we've touched it. The other thing I think is that all of a sudden you see something and it just triggers you to do something. I mean, and that's the way about even going to Scott's. I mean, I find a bench or a table I love, and guess what? I'm going to rearrange a room or do something different because that piece of furniture is so special. So and that's what I love about Atlanta. I mean, you come here and you can go buy the old things, you can come here and buy the new things.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
As much as I love New York where I live, Atlanta to me is just the great design center. We come here once a year, do the shops, go to Scott's, come here. It's amazing. Everything's here.
Well, and you also feel like Atlanta, and it's one of the things that I love about coming here and visiting all of the different markets, is you feel like design is so embraced here,
right,
that people are decorating here, and that's part of their DNA. In New York sometimes it's almost sort of begrudgingly, oh, I've got this space, I've got to fix it up, but here it's like, what do you mean?
I always say growing up in the South is what's made me the designer I am, because just like you were saying, as a little girl, you're there with your mother going to, she's having a dinner party, you're setting the table. I remember once my mother loved to cook, and she was having salmon mousse, and I thought, why would you give your guests mousse? I mean, that is just unbelievable. So then I had to learn what a mousse was. But you learn these things. I mean, it's sort of in your DNA. You really can't escape it. And playing house. I mean, to me, I'm going to go back to Connecticut tonight, or I'll go in the morning. I'll do the flowers. I'll set a table. We have people coming for dinner. I love doing that. I never get tired of playing house,
And you
right?
set a beautiful table.
But I try to get my clients to do that. I'm like, I may decorate this house, but you're in the end going to be the one that's going to give it the life. And, I'm sure we all as designers just wish our clients would go, I say, cut the weeds beside the side of the road and do a flower arrangement. We just own it, and then you're going to have a great place.
Yeah.
But.
And Mark, do you find that your clients, do they come to you in part to sort of learn a lot about the process? Do they want to be engaged with you, or are they happy just to turn it over to you and let you
They're all
run with
different.
it?
I mean, there's clients that are super involved, and there's clients that aren't as involved. They just want you to do it. But I do try to engage them, obviously, because it's their home and where they're going to live and raise their kids or spend their lives. So I think I sometimes draw them in more than they might particularly want. But there are some that are really involved, so this depends. I don't know if they come to me to learn. I think they come to for us to help them create a beautiful home.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought that was one of the magical things about getting to work with an interior designer. And I learned so much working closely with interior designers, and that's really what taught me the business.
I had a client at the end of it who I worked for a lot, and she said, at the end of this, whatever it cost, it was worth the education, because it allowed her then to go out, go to a shop, buy on her own. It gave her the skill set And she did own her house after that, and she would add to it, and I love that. I mean, if somebody doesn't go buy something on their own and bring it to the project, it's never going to be theirs, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah, and you hope that you're going to create the environment where they can have a different lifestyle after you've spent time with them, right? That's the gift that you're sort of leaving behind after all the beautiful work is done, right?
Exactly.
So Annie, let's get into images that you're seeing behind all of us are in part both Bunny's collection with Annie Selke and Mark's collection, both of which are beautiful bedding and rugs. I want to talk specifically about the process of coming to market with a new collaboration. So let's take Mark, for example, since he's the most recent, right? So how long ago did you guys sign that, what I'm sure was an easy agreement,
Simple.
agreement, and
When did you first come? Was it June of last year?
Oh my God, it's all a blur. Maybe
Maybe like
Year and a half
March or
ago?
something,
Yeah.
year and a half ago.
Okay.
So, and you work while we were doing contract negotiations, we were also doing product development. So Mark came with his inspiration, and we, have all our stuff in our office, and we worked for a full day just, architecting the line. So it's like, here's the number of rugs I think we want to do. Here's the amount of bedding we want to do. Here, like, what is the overall, where's the cohesion there? Because you want it to stand together as a collection. And we worked through it. So there's a lot of swatches and Pantone books. And then there's also an Excel spreadsheet that's always sort of going so you can keep track. I don't want it to be redundant. I don't want it to steal the thunder of something that we already sell. I want it to be its own unique collection.
Yeah.
But one that is obviously reflective of the designer whose name is on it.
Right.
So that's how we go about it. And then we send off the designs to our vendors, and sometimes they nail it on the first go, and sometimes it takes much longer. And then we send that stuff for approval to these guys. And then when they approve it, then we order it. And then we work on a launch of the product at one of these markets. So our wholesale, the cadence of our wholesale shows dictates when a collection comes out. And then we also have our direct-to-consumer catalog, which is on everybody's seat.
Which you're all getting, yes.
You all have, and this book was the designer book, and it was shot at Bunny's house in Falls Village and Mark's house in West Hollywood, which was so lovely to allow us to come in and shoot your products in your home. But that's what gives it authenticity. That's what gives it, this is really the designer's house. This is how they live, and this is how they would use our products or their collection in their own house. So that is the retail launch of it. We do a wholesale launch, and then this is the retail launch of it. So that's
Yeah,
how
I
we
was so
do it.
impressed when we had started concepting some ideas and storytelling and around our collection, and we had obviously passed it off to Annie Selke and her team. And then when we got there, they had all these examples of exactly like what we had for inspiration. I had some vintage things that we had already sent, but I was so impressed. And then how the meeting evolved was as we were having conversations, and Annie was saying, "I think we need to do this, we need to do that." She'd be able to go back in the back room and grab
I'm a little
something.
bossy.
I mean, the backstock of vintage things was unbelievable. And so we walked away that day with pretty much like a really solid assortment that stuck very true to this coast to coast theme around how East Coast meets West Coast, how prep-Greek traditional meets Bohemian. It was like I was very impressed because that's not how it usually goes when you're designing products.
It's not usually that easy, right?
No.
Well, people shouldn't get a false sense.
The problem is you go with Annie and her team, and there's you're so stimulated by her collections, her books, her things that she has, and it's almost hard to stay on track because you could do 50 collections.
Welcome to my world.
And so Annie's like, "No, we're doing this," and I'm like, "Oh, this, but we could do
Pretty
this."
thing over there. It's like, buddy, stay focused.
Stay focused on this. So,
But even like the first round of samples were like 80% really great.
Yep.
We just had to tweak a few. But
Wow.
it's really unbelievable if you look at the original concepting to where it ended up and how
It's also, the other great thing is working with Annie and her team. They have experience in what sells, but I will say that you've done a couple of things that we knew probably wouldn't sell a lot, and they didn't. But
But you loved them. You
But you
wanted
love
them.
They were
them. No,
wonderful, and they were just wonderful.
Always the balance of things that are editorial, things that you love, things that are attention getters, and then also the one that just knocks it out of the park from a sales standpoint.
Right.
You just don't even know why. You're like, okay, fine, let's ride that wave, but I'll always get the sassy stuff in there too. I have to
Because
that keeps it interesting for me.
Yeah, and also it photographs and it's more exciting. It's like, it's a little bit more extreme, so it's harder for everyone to use. But I'm always so thrilled that Annie wants to do that because I think it makes the collection richer.
Yeah, and you've gotten so good at sort of understanding what's going to work, and as you were saying earlier, Annie, sort of how many SKUs you need to really make it feel like a cohesive collection. And
that's the merchandising mind in me. It's like, I think we need to balance this out here and this, and I definitely think of it as a whole. But you have to be attracted by one thing the same way these guys go shopping for the right antique, or you just see something, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to build a collection around that or build a room around that. It's the same thing for me with stuff that they bring, like, oh yes, that I can build off of that. And I do that for our collection as well. Like, that is really cool, and that is going to be our fall 2020 sort of linchpin, and that's where that starts. I mean, it sounds a little bit random, but it isn't. It's just everything that's in your head already from forever informs that moment where you are drawn to a particular piece of fabric or art or whatever.
Also, I think that if you just being in the showroom this morning, I was like, there's something for everyone here. It's not, a lot of companies that design, in a way, everything can sort of look alike, and not with you. I mean, you've got, if you want it very clean, it's there. If you want a great pattern, it's there. There's something for almost any situation or interior, and I think that's so exciting because I think a lot of people stay in one lane and they don't have that many options. And she has the best linen shirts, ladies. Please.
Bunny
I have them in every color.
She took the first prototype. This is like last summer. It's on a mannequin, and she's like, I love that. I was like, okay, we'll get another one. And I took it off and gave it to you. She walked away with it. She wore it out of the office.
They're so great.
But I just sent her some more.
So has that been added into the collection?
Oh, they're
and
up
it's
there.
all part
They're
of there.
beautiful.
Okay. All right. Well, so you can explore that after the talk. And Mark, you've branched out into the fashion world as well with beautiful shirt dresses and stripes. Tell me a little bit about that.
Can we get some of those?
Sure.
Yeah.
Where do we
I should
get
be
them?
wearing it. I realize I really
They've
do not
actually seemed
blend
like they've
here
grown
today.
into quite a little side business.
I started in fashion,
Yeah.
and my partner Michael. So I don't know if people know that, but I worked in retail for many years doing visual merchandising and marketing. And Michael, my partner, ran Gap and Banana Republic. So it wasn't such an unusual thing.
No, of course.
It was more of a venture just for us to do something fun. It just so happened that it was based around something I personally love, which are stripes. And surprisingly, it was taken off really well. I'm not.
They're always out of stock when I go.
I'm not as available.
Just
I'm not
saying.
involved that much anymore. But it just.
Is that right? You've distanced yourself from the operation now that it's all
No.
up
It's
and
just
running?
it's Michael runs that mostly.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it just was a very natural thing to do.
Yeah.
Not all of a sudden with
But
an
you're
interior.
always out of stock.
Right, exactly.
It smells so well.
Inventory
As Bunny and
control.
Annie seem to check, so that they're keeping an
I
eye
think
on
just
those.
a nice box, a Mark Delicious Sikes box, delivered
dresses?
to our
Okay.
hotel with
It's
a shirt
it's on
dress.
its way.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
No, they are very, very popular.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm curious, and Annie, you've got a beautiful catalog that's out here for everyone. Bunny, you just did the most beautiful catalog for Bunny Williams' home, which I guess that's gotten mailed out or is going out.
Just going out
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I spent some serious time with that before I left, and I love catalogs, And I love that catalogs still exist in today's day and age, right? And lots of people in the audience are nodding because, yes, how fabulous to hold a beautiful catalog and see the product in that way. Tell me a little bit about I'm sure internally people are going, oh, we've got to cut costs, we've got to stop doing some of this catalog work. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny, with Bunny Williams Home, it was my idea to really go with the catalog because we had done a small one and, it was in our showroom. And I said, I don't think people really, we have one showroom in New York and we've been at High Point periodically, but it's terribly expensive. So I need to get it out for people to see what we're doing. And I said, it needs to be big pictures. It needs to tell a story. You need to be able to see it. So the catalog's bigger. And we, I think that the cost of it is a lot less than doing a showroom someplace. And we hope to really eventually have it be our sort of magazine. So we tell the story of why are we doing this? How do you use it? What it's all about.
Yeah.
And it was fun to do. I mean, I've got a great team, and we photographed it in my guest house in Connecticut. We took all the furniture and put all that furniture in like Annie does.
Yeah,
I mean,
we did
Annie's
that,
pictures, when she comes to our house in the country, I get the picture and I'm like, it looks better than it does when I live there.
And she plays a little game with John, her husband. It's like, John, where do you think this is in the house? And he can't find it, right? It's pretty funny. We had dinner at Bunny's, was it, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I only had the prototype of this catalog.
Right.
So it was, we had printed it on our screen so she could see the images of her house. And then I think BB had gotten into something, her dog, and she starts to go like, like, oh my God. And I take the catalog and I shoot it under BB, and she threw up on the catalog.
Okay.
But he had gone
use
through it, another use.
Yeah.
Why do
I
you
just
think
wasn't
I
sure
have
if
so
it was an
many
indoor
of these?
outdoor rug.
Don't you think I have a lot of indoor outdoor rugs?
Yes.
Boy, anybody who has dogs, just lay these
It
rugs
just
on. They
happens, yep.
are fantastic. I find now everybody wants indoor outdoor rugs and outdoor furniture fabrics.
Yes.
Luckily they've gotten softer, but they really do. People say, is this outdoor fabric? And I say, yes, because it.
So, and is that right? So many people are asking for indoor outdoor fabric, right? And it Perennials and some of the other companies that, again, they've done an amazing job, and I get it. But is that trend here to stay? Or do people need all of this outdoor fabric on their
But here's the
sofas
thing,
in their house?
upholstery underneath indoor outdoor fabric is still upholstery. So,
Yeah.
you need to clean that too.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's not a cure-all for
I
fabric.
think I do
Help me
think,
with this, Bunny. Help
I
me with
do think what's amazing to me is the quality of it. I mean, when it first came out, it was like canvas. You couldn't
Right.
even sit on it. Now, with these fibers, it is as soft. I mean, there's indoor outdoor chenille. I mean,
Yeah.
Right,
it's
yeah.
amazing. And so with people who have kids who,
Sure.
hang around, who have dogs, it's good. Now, I also think a beautiful chair can have a beautiful real fabric on it.
A real
But
fabric.
But
Right.
you don't want
Exactly.
to have
A real fabric.
A grown-up
Yeah.
fabric.
but you don't want to have to recover your sectional every 6 months when the kid's got the popsicle in it. So
Right.
I would say that I use a lot of it on the
Okay.
furniture that I know is going to be used the most.
Okay.
And then I put beautiful fabrics on
Pillows.
Pillows
and a
Okay.
a bergère or a pretty chair in the room.
Okay.
So you don't really nobody's going to walk in there and think, oh, they've used indoor outdoor fabric here.
Right.
They've gotten so good. I
Yeah,
mean,
they are good.
Yeah. Well, so and same for you, Mark. I mean, do people want?
Yeah, I mean, I think if people have children, it's always
Yeah.
something that comes up.
Hello, grown-up spill
Yeah.
thing as
Yeah.
well.
It's just
Well,
something.
and Annie and Bunny
Red
sort of
wine,
only hang
anyone?
with dog
Just saying.
people. They
The
only have friends with lots of
The older
dogs.
the grown up, the more the spills.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I
Or
think-
the more flamboyant that would happen.
So you guys think that's a trend that's here to stay then?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's a trend. I think it's just about function. So
And also, I
it's
think
function.
it's about the market of creating these things. I mean, that's
it's a good
what.
business opportunity.
Oh, yeah, it works. I'm just
I
saying.
mean, for instance, silk curtains silk rots. I
It
mean,
rots.
I don't care what you do. So now that they've got these beautiful fabrics that look like silk, that are dressy and elegant, and they're not silk, they're going to stand up to sun. I mean, sun is one of the most invasive things, even in Connecticut.
Like
I mean,
faded
it
furniture,
fades.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at my own house and think, oh dear.
You don't even know, though. You can move the piece of furniture. You're like, oh my God, it's an entirely different color on this side. But you don't notice it in
Well, so,
situ.
and so the answer to that is what? Is again the outdoor
Yeah,
fabric?
if you care. I mean, I don't mind a little fading, but some people object to that. And
Yeah.
in our living room in Putacana, I covered everything in a blue cotton. It was an inexpensive blue cotton.
Durly.
And it was beautiful, and it faded. And all of a sudden, 8 years into having the house, I looked at it, turned a cushion over. It was like, luckily, when I bought it, I had bought enough to do it again. So I had everything recovered. And
It was Durly, right? I asked you one time.
it was a Durly, inexpensive.
Perfect blue.
But it was the perfect blue.
It's a perfect red.
But I ordered, and I have a client now who orders, every time we do something, she doubles the order. I'm like, okay.
Really?
I did that for my sofa that I had made because of the dogs. It's like, I'm just going to order a lot more of the fabric. And I had 2 sets of cushion covers made
Wow.
for it. And I needed it.
Okay. It needed it.
Yeah,
'Cause it
because
got
you
worn
don't
out
want to, oh God, I
pretty
got to
quickly.
do the whole thing again. Sort of modular for
It's
when
also, it's
things
funny
happen.
when people say, oh, you must redecorate all the time. And I say, you must be kidding. I mean, I have lived.
But I doesn't have time for that.
No, but I love what I love,
Right.
and I always think, I had this fabric on a chair in my living room, and it was discontinued like everything is. And it took me a long time to find a replacement that I was going to love as much. And so actually, I did find one, and I bought enough to cover the chair again in case. But I tend to fix something, like replace a rug, but I don't redecorate the whole thing. I mean, I'll,
Yeah.
after all the years
Right,
of
your
being...
personality doesn't change. You still
No,
love what
but
you
you
love.
might think, okay, this rug needs, something's happened, or I want a different one, or you fall in love with something. But I don't redecorate. I mean,
Right, because you loved it.
And then-
That's why you.
But your
that's why you did it.
new New York apartment
Yeah.
allowed you to do
we- yeah,
something brand new. It's so fabulous.
Right.
And then
Well,
you,
so and tell us a little bit about that, because you did get to do something new in the New York apartment. Tell us how you thought about that space and sort of the starting process there for you.
well, I am married to John Rosselli. And John Rosselli, it's very interesting. Some people, John really doesn't care about decoration. He cares about his things. He cares
His
about
many collections.
His objects and his things. And so even when we did the house, it's very funny because I said to John, I want to show you what I'm going to do. And he looks at it and he said, it just looks awful. And I'm like, John.
Oh dear.
Well, of course he loves it, but he's so afraid that, he would have straw rugs, white walls, and his art, his furniture.
Right.
So he doesn't want me to over decorate, So when he sees something, he's like, oh, I don't know about that. And it was, I said, this is going to be the last thing we ever do. This is going to be the end of our life and apartment because John loves New York. And I said, I want to use the good furniture we have, but I want to add to it contemporary art. I want the lighting to be very modern. I want the coffee tables to be incredibly modern. And so I've got my beautiful, he had a great pair of 18th century Régence chairs with a coffee table made out of resin that is divine. And so every decision was a little bit of old and new. How do we, and all the most of the furniture we had,
Right.
but I put it in different fabrics. And it's an eclectic taste.
it's fabulous. I left with total house envy. Whenever I'm at her garden, her house, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
no, I've got
Yeah.
to start all over again.
It's also, I'm sure, no, but it's easier for you. I think it's easier for you as a designer to do something that you couldn't explain to your client to do. For instance, in our little library, John had an incredible 18th century French chair, and it was in tapestry, original 18th century tapestry. Now, some of the tapestry was in really good shape and some wasn't. So the cushion had gone. So I left the chair, I left the 18th century tapestry, and I put a green velvet, the color, for the cushion. And it's in a room with a very contemporary rug, fabric that is quite modern, and I couldn't explain that to somebody. It happens to work, and it also makes it not look so matched up, and it blends. But if I had to explain that to a client, they would think I had lost my mind. They would say, I like the chair, but you've got to recover it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. But there's something about that I think we as designers can take chances and
Tell
do
them
things.
about the swamp.
The swamp art?
Swamp art.
Yes,
so I walk
exactly.
into your beautiful, entryway, and it's Tiffany box blue, lacquered walls. That's where I have like true envy. And you were saying, oh, but it's just a little too pretty, so I need to add something. Here's this art you showed it me this big, and it's a swamp. And she's like, I'm going to put the swamp. How big is it? Is it like 12 by 8?
No, it's a huge photograph. I actually, I'm intrigued by swamps. I mean, and yet I'm scared of them because I hate snakes. But I think I guess being a gardener, a swamp is this thing that just happens naturally that you can't
It waters
fix.
itself.
The water, it does it, and all the things growing up in the trees. So I've always been fascinated by swamps. And I met this young photographer who comes down and photographs. And so it's this huge 5-foot square photograph of a swamp.
And it softened the blue.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It's quite beautiful on the blue.
But the juxtaposition of those two things, right? It's really outstanding. And very few people would do that. Like, oh my God, this calls for a swamp.
Well, but one of the things that you talked about that you were able to do is bring in some modern pieces, right? And so part of our conversation today is in part about this classic, timeless design. How do you continue to update? How do you continue to pull it forward, right? To incorporate the classic elements that make it feel warm, but also to recognize it's 2019 and we're moving forward. So I
think lighting is one of the most, years and years ago, you were wiring a toll thing to make a lamp out of, or, a porcelain vase. I think even on antique furniture, to put modern lighting. I mean, lighting is modern. Mm-hmm. And even in our house in the country, I'm trying to change out, the lantern, which was kind of the period of the house, to something more contemporary of the same quality. And it just gives it a boost. It just says, okay, sconces in the bathrooms, things like that. And, coffee table. A coffee table is really a modern thing. It wasn't, the 18th century, they didn't have them, so have a
modern one.
Have a modern one. And it's always the yin and yang. It's always and I think that's what you were saying when you save room for the special piece. You know that, part of, and in decorating, every decision you make, that forms how you're going to make the next decision, because you're putting together all of these things in a room that you hope has a personality and and you have to think about each thing in relationship to.
I mean, a room it's a puzzle. It's basically, and it's a beautiful room. I think should be a mix of old and new and modern and traditional and hard and soft and high and low. It's it's just about when you put it all together what it looks like. But there's definitely a need for the past and the present.
I always say that, probably my biggest torture as a designer is I love really beautiful furniture. I mean, I love gilded furniture, but I like a basket. I like something really grand, and I like something as simple as it can be.
Organic.
And it's organic. And so it's always this sort of fight with myself to make sure that it isn't all one way or the other, that there's and I'm not afraid to mix it up.
The most beautiful rooms have that friction.
Yeah.
Like of the gilded chair next to the basket.
And I think a lot of times in design, people try to do too much of the same. And it's okay, but it's not going to have that passion and energy that.
Well, and as you were saying, Bunny, I mean, and often in those projects that feel very much the same, they are missing those elements, whether it's the antiques or whether it's just something that personalizes it or warms it up. You are always encouraging your clients to keep some of their furniture and to keep some of their art, and that's about who they are, right? And,
I mean, yesterday I was just finishing on an installation, which we always do, and the clients had things, and they had this whole hall of, I mean, it must have been 80. It was the art, and I had to get there yesterday morning and hang it, and I'm like, oh wow. And so I guess Wednesday I was doing that, and so I had to think about it, and I said, just leave me alone for a minute. And then when it all came together, they were so excited because it was there. One hall had things that they bought in India, things that they bought on their travels. And when you group it together and make it work. Now, would I have bought either those things? Not necessarily, but they had, and they had been on that trip, and they remembered, and I made it actually look good. You know, when the laundry room and the flower arranging room is all with, and their children are grown, they've got grandchildren, but they had a daughter who was quite a good artist, and so all her pictures are in the laundry room. Well, that's their house, and that's what you want to be able to do, is to make the owner come in and know it's their house and not somebody else's.
So I want to open it up for questions, because I bet some people in the audience have questions. But one of the things that at Business of Home that we talk about a lot is the changes in the industry and sort of the impact that it's having on all of us. And Bunny's taking a deep breath as I say this. Talk to me a little bit about, Bunny, about some of those changes, things that are impacting your business, things that you see affecting the market in general.
Well, it's in many ways. I mean, let's say take the antique market. So you go in and you see a table. A client can go on one of these antique things, come back and say, oh, look, here are 5 other tables, and they're less than the one you showed me. And I'm like, yeah, but that one is not as good. It's a reproduction. It was made in 1950s. You know, how do you know? I mean, this is where the clients, particularly young clients who know how to sit in their computer and seem to have time to, it just makes the process longer.
Yeah.
You know, it makes
more explanation.
It makes more explanation. It makes it longer. And the other thing is that, you know, I work on a cost plus basis. I mean, I'm not very honest, but the idea that everything is available to your clients, you know, and then you have to say, how do I charge? I mean, I'll tell you, one thing I do, and I make it very clear, I said, everything that's going to go in this house is going to go through us. I don't care how it is. It's a net plus this percentage. And the minute you go behind that, we're over. Because there has to be a commitment to tie up my staff, to tie up the time to do it. And if all of a sudden you're in it and you find, oh, well, we bought this and we bought that, we bought the other, I'm like, no. So you have to have that discussion, I think, in the beginning of who's buying what. And in the end, I want to make sure, and I don't care if it's a $2 basket, but it's good and it's right and it's the right scale and it's the right for the project. I mean, I don't have a lot of it, but I do find that the computer slows you down because they're all looking at it all the time. And it's complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated. Same, we don't have that. We have in our contract basically that if people like bring something to the table and we advise on it, we get some type of markup on it. But it happens more and more and more. But I think what I learned too is that the more you start integrating with the client, they start trusting you more, they start doing less of that.
Right.
You kind of nip it in the bud at the beginning.
And also when you can find better things than they can find, then they're like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, I know better sources, better places, and once you prove that, then they kind of stop it. But it's complex. Listen, look at retail, look at the stores. New York City, it used to take me 2 or 3 days to go to all the antique shops in New York City. Now it takes me a day. You know, it's a shrinking situation, and it's sad. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know where, you probably know more where it's going than I do, because you talk about it all the time.
Well, we do talk about it a lot, and you know, we're the Business of Home is hosting a conference in September, a 2-day conference called the Future of Home, and it's in part to bring industry leaders and also some real thought leaders from even outside of our little world to talk to us about where all of this is going and what we need to be thinking about with how our businesses are impacted. Our vendors, our sourcing is so important to us. Where are all these companies going to go in the future?
I mean, Annie and I were talking about this morning. I mean, these websites that you go in there, you put your room in, and they're, you know, the 3D, and you put it in the space. I mean, for me to do that for my business would be astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
And yet somebody's done the software, written the code for it. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see if these companies make money in the end, because a number of big companies haven't shown profits. But they've affected the buying, how one buys, big time.
Luckily for us, there's only one Bunny Williams. No computer will ever be able to recreate the magic that is Bunny Williams. Luckily for us, but
She gave me an app to download at breakfast this morning, Plant Snap. I'm like, go Bunny. So, I mean, don't tell yourself.
She's on it.
Sure, she's on her phone a lot.
I was telling her the other night at dinner, it's like I love on Saturdays on Instagram, because you can just expect for Bunny's Eye to have pictures of things that are happening in the garden and beautiful floral arrangements. And it's so, having spent time there, it's so wonderful to see each week how things change. So you're on it. Just doing
I'm
it.
trying to be. Now that I have my new bandolier phone around my neck and I don't have to go look for it, I take more pictures.
there you go. That piece of modern technology. Okay, shall we open it up really quickly to questions? Is someone have a mic there? Yes, indeed. Okay, so does anybody have questions? Don't be shy, raise hands, or we'll keep chatting. But anyone?
Somebody must have a question. Anything.
Really? We covered everything you wanted to hear?
yeah.
Okay, you've got a question. Let's bring you a mic real quick. All right.
I don't know if this has happened to you all because of the caliber that you are, but have you ever, maybe in early days, have you ever had a client that called you in and said, here's my idea of what I'd like in this area, and it was absolutely horrible?
That's why I don't do.
That's why Annie stepped out of decorating altogether.
Oh my God, that's
She's-
awful.
And they wanted to just add to the horribleness of it, and you had to say,
No.
You look for a
"There's
local
no way I'm gonna
arsonist.
do."
No.
You should never do something I think, unfortunately, you should never do something you don't want to do. But I'll tell you what's interesting. Some of my favorite projects ended up being the house I hated the most. And I years ago had these clients who I adored. I thought they were just the most unbelievably interesting people. And they had this house that when they were young, they had built this house. And it was, I can't describe to you how I felt about this house. It had a conversation pit in the middle of it with a stone fire. I mean, it was the worst of sort of 50s bad architecture. And I didn't know what to say. I went to see them. I had met them socially. They were friends of other clients. And I went to see them and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get my head around this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I'm looking around, and there was a dining room that was perfectly hideous. And he opened these doors. There were these concealed doors. And they opened the doors. And in these cupboards were 4 sets of the most beautiful Chinese export dinner services I had ever seen. I mean, like museum
work with
quality.
this.
Wow.
And I thought, now why do they live in this house and they have this in this cupboard? But at least I knew there was something, there was going to be some vocabulary. And it ended up
There was
being
hope.
quite interesting. I mean, and he even got rid of the stone around the stone fireplace. We covered it in plaster, and I actually could have more modernized and simplified the interiors. And guess what? I hung one of the Chinese export dinner services on the wall of that dining room in this modern house, and it was divine. But my first reaction is, but you need to know, even if it's awful, you should not do something you aren't happy, because you'll never
Right.
do it well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
I did tell them that I can never do what you want to do because it's just not in me. And and so I drew a rendering of something, and he's open to it. But
Yes.
it was just the first time that I've ever come
I
across
think
something so horrible.
that's happened to me a few times, but what I've tried to do is interject something that they've said into
Right.
something that I was thinking, so they feel like you're listening to them
Right.
and hearing them. And there's been many times, especially in a recent project, where I just was shocked, by maybe some of the ideas. But the more time I thought about it, I was able to interject it, and it all works out right. You can kind of, figure it out. So I think that's
You have to like your clients. I can tell you, if you have a rapport and you like your clients, and you'll work through it. If you don't like them, I can always tell in about 10 minutes whether I'm going to like these.
Well, so and tell me quickly, Bunny. So the meeting process and the interviewing process, is that you bringing them into your office, or you going to their home?
No, they come to my office.
They come to your office.
And every time I don't do that, I'm sorry.
You regret it later.
Because I knew
Yeah.
there was a reason.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say the story, but it was a really funny story when you went to New Canaan, the one with
I
the
know.
moat. Yeah.
Because if people are serious, they'll come to your office. They'll come and meet you. And if people say, oh, you have to come here, and I'm like, I think we should meet first. And anytime I have gone to them first,
Right.
I was absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it sort of that way for you as well, Mark? Do you sort of?
Well, most of my jobs are outside of Los Angeles, so that makes it a little harder. So a lot of times we go there because we have to see the house and have those types of meetings.
Yeah.
But if it's local, I agree. Yes.
Yeah. But Annie, I know that's been sort of a cornerstone of your business, is working with people that you really like.
Yes.
Right?
Because life is too short
Yeah.
to do it any other way.
Yeah. And
I've got two of them on the sofa. See?
Yeah. I mean,
Lucky me.
and that's,
But Annie, listen, I think the thing that most impressed me, not only did I love working with you, but what she's done in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and buying these buildings and the energy. You go up there and, in like a lot of places, whether you're in the South or in the North, there are these wonderful old buildings and things that we're not manufacturing. And Annie has bought these buildings in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The entire operation is there. The shipping is there. The staff is there. How many people are there?
175.
170
And
people,
50 in
jobs
India.
in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is
Yeah.
the future of what America should be doing, is that we need to get out of big cities. We need to bring whatever businesses to communities where people can afford to buy a house, live well. It's absolutely beautiful countryside. And, I remember years and years ago, the first time I went up there, I thought, this is unbelievable. And I wish more businesses would think about how to do that across the country. I mean, there's so many opportunities for it.
Well, and bringing so much of that industry back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
celebrating.
we're in what was a textile mill. It made Civil War uniforms back.
Yeah.
It was built in 1863. So it still has a textile, provenance. And we've updated the building and love where we are.
Yeah. No, Annie's is a remarkable story.
I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's incredible partnership between the three people here on the sofa, and it does show you the importance of working with people that you really like and feel a real partnership with. And will you join me in thanking all of them for joining us today? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Good.